Test, check, check, test, test. Two, two. Check, check, test, check, test, test. Check, 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 test. You can give it more or no? Or is that as the highest? That's the highest? Check, one, two, two, check, check, test, test. One, two, three, four, check, one, two. Testing, testing, testing. One, two, three, four, five, six. Testing, one, two, two. Good? Okay.
Green is on.
Okay. Good evening. We're just waiting for the last few people to move into the room, but want to welcome you to tonight's Illinois Issues Forum, a nonpartisan event here at College of DuPage. I'm Dan Bindert, station manager at WDCB. We're known by many of you as Chicago's home for jazz, but we also have been known for many, many years as a station that brings you jazz, blues, news, and more. And as part of our news and public affairs outreach, we're undertaking tonight's event. Brian O'Keefe, our news director at WDCB, is also the host of Daylight Edition every weekday morning from 5 to 6 a.m. and also our morning newscast that you hear during our jazz programming. He'll be the host for tonight's event, and he's going to tell you more about it in just a moment. We want to, before we get started, thank very briefly our local sponsors at I Have a Bean Coffee in Wheaton, and also at Chicks and Salsa Mexican Grill in Glen, Ellyn. And thank you. We thank them for their support. And we'd also like to thank AARP Illinois that is helping to put together events like this across the state, as is our partner station that is working with us on tonight's event, NPR Illinois, which is WUIS in Springfield, Illinois. And they obviously have, being in Springfield, a closeness to this issue that we're going to be talking about throughout the evening. So we thank you for coming out to the event. And before we get started, want to welcome from WUIS, NPR Illinois, our partner station in tonight's event, Randy Eccles.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate the turnout tonight and you taking the time to come and talk about the budget and how it affects you. We are doing a listening tour through about 11 markets in Illinois. And sitting in the state capitol, we realized that a lot of people hadn't had the opportunity to say how the budget was impacting them. And having done 2 of these forums already, we've heard a lot of people who didn't realize some of the details of how the budget process is working. So we're looking forward to this great panel tonight discussing that. And we're just happy as the State House Bureau that delivers news with Brian Mackey and things to WDCB to be a part of this. And right now I'd like to introduce our sponsor, the president of AARP Illinois, Bob Gallo.
Thanks, Randy, and thanks all of you for being here this evening. I know it's not the most wonderful weather, so you made the extra effort to come out. I'm glad you arrived safely. Illinois is a unique state, and right now, not in a good way. It's the only state in the United States that is incapable of passing a budget. And the pain of that so many people across the state are feeling is unconscionable, wrong, and immoral in our opinion. So we've joined with NPR Illinois and the affiliate stations, and we're calling our effort at AARP Enough is Enough, and you'll be hearing more and more about that as we go forward. But as you listen to the panelists this evening, think about your role in this, because when you have a government that is dysfunctional and the electorate, you, the voters, are not demanding change of each of your representatives. And I say that because the leadership can't get along right now. So the only thing that's going to change this, in our opinion, is if you contact your specific legislator in the House and Senate and tell them they're not doing their job, and tell them that they represent your interests, and to make excuses and to blame somebody else is not solving the problem, so they have to get back to work. So, I was reading a story in Cranes this evening about our utility rates that will be going up again at the end of this year and even more the next year. They can vote to raise your utility rates. They can vote to bail out Exelon nuclear power plant, who's hugely profitable, but they can't pass a budget. It's the basic job of the governor and the legislator in every state in the country to pass a budget. So listen, but at the same time act when we're done. There'll be folks standing at the doors as you're leaving. There's a card here that lets you take action. There's an 800 number that will connect you to your representative. And I really hope that not just coming here to listen, but to take action yourselves and demand that our elected officials go back to work and solve the problems of the state and put Illinois back on the path to fiscal help. So thank you very much, and let me turn it over to Brian for the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So first, I just want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, because certainly the weather has been we've had great March weather. And you have come out to have this discussion this evening on what is a very opportune evening, because this afternoon, the state Senate has passed almost all of what has been called for the past 6 months or so, the grand bargain. Roughly a $37.3 billion budget was approved by the state Senate this afternoon. It includes a $5 billion income tax increase that they say will lead to a balanced budget. Shortly after that vote was taken in the state Senate, the governor issued a news release indicating that he would not approve that budget unless it includes a property tax freeze, which it does not. So while there was some action, we may be right where we started again. Illinois is now, the last time Illinois had a full year budget was June 30th of 2015. And a lot of stuff has happened to bring us to the beginning of June 2017. I was having a conversation with someone at the station this morning about this forum this evening. And one of the things they said to me was, yeah, I know it's bad, but I don't really feel like it's affecting me. And that's the conversation that we need to have tonight, because a lot of your neighbors are saying the same thing. Yeah, I know Illinois doesn't have a budget, but my kids are still going to school, and my pension payment's still coming in the mail and getting direct deposited. I don't really feel like it's affecting me. So that's the conversation that we want to have tonight. I'm frequently asked why I wear a bow tie, and there are many reasons. Tonight I'm wearing a bow tie that I bought several years ago at a scholarship auction. This particular tie was owned by the late Senator Paul Simon. Aww. And I thought I would share a quote from Senator Simon that I hope we can all remember as we have this conversation this evening, because this is not a conversation about pointing fingers or shouting at people who disagree with us or playing the blame game. There's plenty of blame game to go on. But Senator Simon said, life would be unbearable hating people who disagree with you, because sooner or later, almost everyone disagrees with some measure. This becomes important to government because it means men and women who disagree can sit down after a debate and discuss their disagreements with relative calm and come to a compromise. That's what we need in Illinois, is for everyone to sit down, recognize they may disagree, but they have to find a compromise. I want to introduce you to our panel this evening. Julie Yurko is president and CEO of the Northern Illinois Food Bank. Kirk Dillard is a former state senator and current chairman of the Regional Transportation Authority. RTA serves as an umbrella organization for the mass transit providers in the Chicago area. And Angela Atkins is executive director of NAMI DuPage. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And one of the things I thought we would do to start this evening is talk about some of those impacts. So, Julie, your organization doesn't necessarily see direct impact from this budget stalemate, but you see it on a daily basis nonetheless. What do you see?
Absolutely. So in our work at the food bank, we are a distributor of groceries to over 800 feeding sites across 13 counties in Illinois. Our work is very highly funded by private contributions. So 82% of the food we distribute is given to us. Only 10% of that food actually comes from the government, and that's all coming from the federal government. Sure. So we receive no state funding, which over the last few years has been a real blessing for us because of the crisis. What we do have, though, is that food, the funding is flowing through the state, whether it's for our after-school feeding programs or our summer feeding programs or some of the commodities food that we get. And so we have seen delays in payment on that. But again, when I'm looking at less than 10% of my business, for us, it's okay. We're okay. Now, sadly, the families that we serve, all of our neighbors that are living in our 13 counties, they are coming to us because they have a resource gap. So that means that when they look at their monthly budget and they look at how am I going to go to the grocery store and pay my utility bills, pay for education, housing, transportation, my medical bills, I don't have enough at the end of the month. And so what we do, our work is, well, we can help you supplement your resources by giving you this wonderful food that's nutritious and exactly what you need, and you can come and get it in a very dignified way. When those resources are taken away from some of these other areas that are dependent on state funding, that means their gap becomes wider. And so that means that they are going to need to come to us and get even more from us in terms of their food relief.
One of your partner agencies, the Loaves and Fishes in Naperville, I've talked with several times. And when you talk about that resource gap, it doesn't have to be something tremendous. It could be a new set of, you need a new set of tires for your car.
Yes.
And so you buy the tires, but the money's got to come from somewhere else. And suddenly they find themselves at a food pantry.
Exactly. Usually it's not. You know, and usually we're talking a few $100s, but they simply do not have those resources to pay to go get their medicines or to keep the lights on. And so as soon as, you know, when we see things like assistance for childcare being cut, that means it's going to cost them more to find a place to put their children while they work. 77% of our families are working families. And so they have to invest more there, which means the resource gap in other areas is going to get larger. We have seen across the United States over the last couple of years, we've actually seen a decrease in food insecurity, which is terrific, from about 48 million Americans to 42 million Americans. However, those who are in need, that their need has increased, and that's being driven by food costs, but it's also being driven by issues like we have here in Illinois with the budget.
Kirk, your agency is dealing very directly with this stalemate, this impasse.
You know, Brian, it's one that's often overlooked, and I always see the you know, and I tell my board at the Regional Transportation Authority, look, if you think we have it bad, you could be, you know, you could be the College of DuPage or the University of Illinois, or you could be working with the, you know, with people with disabilities, or hospitals that haven't received payments. But the Regional Transportation Authority sort of gets lost in the discussion. But as of this afternoon, Brian, the state of Illinois owes the Regional Transportation Authority, which is the CTA, Metra, and PACE, $454.8 million. We're 10 months behind in our payments, and unlike vendors who actually get paid interest by the state of Illinois, we at the RTA go out and we borrow the $454 million. Costs us a couple of million a year, but what could I do with a couple of million? You know, I could replace cars on Metra. We could improve service. You know, we have to scale back sometimes on service that we have out there. But a third of all the RTA's equipment is beyond its useful life. And we have a backlog of what we call the state of good repair, just to maintain what we have of nearly $30 billion. And so you know, we have we move 2 million people a day. You know, that's a sixth of the population of Illinois. And we read a lot of bad stuff about our state, which we all love, or you wouldn't be here like I wouldn't be here tonight. But we do have a success story, and that success story is that in the central business district of Chicago, we have had more corporate relocations to Chicago than any other place in America. And that's great because I have young high school age children, and I want our millennial generation, graduates of the College of DuPage, graduates of the University of Illinois, at Urbana-Champaign, University of Chicago, DePaul, where I was at. I'm double dipping with campuses today, but I started my day at DePaul University. I'm in Lincoln Park. I want our kids to stay here. We are approaching soon that half of our workforce will be the millennial generation. The millennial generation lives on mass transit, and they live on Uber. Chicago has the lowest percentage of millennials that own automobiles of any city in the United States. The mayor of Indianapolis recently said that if you want millennials to stay in your city, and we want our kids to stay here, trying to sell them your city without mass transit is like trying to sell them a phone without a camera. So, you know, we forget sometimes, and part of it's me, just because I feel guilty that there are other more worthy causes that certainly need the state to step up faster than the RTA. But the RTA is critical for economic development, and we are one of the major reasons that there have been these corporate relocations. I grew up here, and more people live and work in downtown Chicago and the South Loop today than ever before in the city's history. The elevated trains are at their all-time highest capacity, and Metro a year ago was at its second highest capacity. So there are very good things going on economic development-wise in certain parts of Illinois, and we need to fuel those because they pay for the schools in Glen, Ellyn, or Cairo. But you know, the RTA, which moves 2 million people a day, is being impacted by this budget. I know that they're looking at making further cuts, especially with transportation for people with disabilities. Everybody, my wife and others say, hey, what does PACE do? You know, what do they move? I always tell my wife, don't forget that PACE moves literally in increasing, and it increases by double digits numbers as we get older as a society, more people with disabilities than ever before. And PACE is a lifeblood for people to get to their doctor's appointments or to have contact with the real world, to be able to stay in their homes. And the state is looking at and has cut funding for transportation with people with disabilities. So, you know, we're all in this together. We'll talk a little bit more about higher education. I'm on the College of DuPage's foundation board, and I stay very active with my undergraduate alma mater, Western Illinois University. You know, one of those rural universities that's in a world of hurt, lost half its budget in the last couple of years and is barely staying afloat while it tries to compete and not have students go across the border to Iowa, but to keep our Illinois children in Illinois, not only to go to college, but when they graduate, so they're around here with us as well. So Brian, thank you for doing this. Thank you all for coming out on a gray and cloudy night. At least it's nice to know somebody really does care about the state's budget situation besides the four of us up here.
Kirk, one of the things that I'm surprised you didn't mention it, because frequently when I talk with you or your counterparts in mass transit, especially Metra, you're quick to point out that some of your equipment dates back to the Eisenhower administration, which points to a twofold issue, especially with regard to transit, and that is the capital bill. There is Illinois, the budget that I mentioned earlier is not capital spending. That's the operating budget. And until that gets squared away, the prospects for a capital bill seem remote, and that's another impact.
We have not had in Illinois a capital or infrastructure spending bill in 6 years. And I watch every day our competing cities that compete for, you know, my daughter to go work there, whether it's Seattle or San Francisco or Boston or Dallas, Texas. These other states, in fact, I just did a press conference a week ago in Washington, D.C. with the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce and my counterpart from the Phoenix Mass Transit Agency. Both Indiana and Phoenix have told me they have their money set aside to do matching money for Donald Trump's or President Trump's $1 trillion of expected, you know, national infrastructure money. Illinois hasn't had a capital bill in 6 years. We certainly don't have our matching money set aside when it's time to go. We just don't get a new, you know, the red line modernization on the elevated. We have to have a matching local fund. And when President Obama, on his way out, gave $1.2 billion for the red line and purple line modernization in Chicago, it had to be matched with $1 billion of local money. Mayor Emanuel did something called a tax increment financing district, and that's how we had our local match. No help from the state. But all the other states really are investing in mass transit, especially, I always tell, I'm a Republican, this is not a partisan issue, but red states like Texas and Utah are really investing heavily. And then I was just with Indianapolis, obviously that's Vice President Pence's state. When the new governor of Indiana took over, and he was Mike Pence's lieutenant governor, the very first thing he did was pass a gas tax increase in Indiana so that they would have the matching money to be able to access some of the $1 trillion of President Trump. And you know, we're not positioned to do that in Illinois. We'll talk a little bit later, Brian, I'm sure, but you know, I believe that the state's operating budget and capital budget ought to go hand in hand. And I'm a former legislator. If you're going to ask my former colleagues to make some incredibly difficult votes in the next 7, 8, 10 days, it makes it easier to pass the operating budget of the state if you have a capital bill where they can go back to Effingham and say, you know, we're finally going to get this new interchange, or we're finally going to get something new.
Right.
The two go hand in hand. It's like the old song, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. I've always believed, and I was a former chief of staff to a governor in the state, that the two go hand in glove, and it helps you pass some very difficult things if you have something positive out there to be able to tell people back home that you're doing, especially if it helps economic development.
And part of the reason I mentioned that capital spending is so much of the pain and so much of the impact of this budget stalemate is hidden. And that is an element, an area where it is hidden. You don't see that there's not a capital budget in place, and that there can't be probably until this other budget is taken care of. And in the realm of hidden impacts, Angela, you deal with a constituency that unfortunately for a lot of people is invisible and costly.
Yes, it really is. So just for those of you that aren't so aware of the services that we provide, we're an organization that has been around for 32 years in DuPage County. We're a national organization, and we provide support and education and workforce development programs and social recreational programs for individuals and their families who are living with mental illness. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is life and death, because this is literally what we are talking about with mental illness and the invisible costs of this state budget. Like Julie, we actually don't get funded by the state, but the fallout of the organizations that do provide mental health services, that do or did receive state funding, is colossal. We serve about 40,000 families and individuals each year, and that number is increasing. We've seen multiple increases from that over the last 2 or 3 years. And it's not them and us. Mental illness, I can guarantee that in this room, there are some of you that are dealing personally with your own mental health issues. There are some of you that have close family members that are dealing with serious mental health issues. 1 in 5 people have a mental health issue, and that can be depression, that can be anxiety. And the invisible costs of these cuts, I mean, mental illness has always been misunderstood and underfunded for many, many years, going back to the 60s when many of the state hospitals closed. And whether the rights or the wrongs of putting people in those kind of situations, the fact remains that there wasn't an infrastructure put in place. There was no resources put in place to really take care of those individuals. Hence, we get many, many people that are obviously living on the streets. And now those of you that have followed Tom Dart from the jail in Chicago are probably very well aware that that's now considered one of the nation's largest institutions for those that are mentally ill. It costs about $38,000 to incarcerate somebody. Thresholds had programs. They're one of the largest mental health organizations, and they are owed $4 million over from the last couple of years from state funding. So they've had to close many, many of their programs. They can provide community care, residential care, therapy, and really being able to get that individual back on their feet for about $4,000 a month, where you can do the math. And unfortunately, what we're going to see from this is more and more people that are homeless. So when it was first stated that it doesn't seem to impact our community, I can assure you that over the next few years, we are going to see far more people that are homeless. Those people are then going to be arrested and they're going to be jailed. And the whole infrastructure of human services in general is dissipating. We can't put that infrastructure back overnight. That infrastructure has gone. You know, United Way, every quarter have been doing, for the last 2 years, have been doing surveys, and they are showing and talking about the programs that have closed, the loss of work for the individuals that worked in that nonprofit health arena. It's massive. It's absolutely massive. Well, even if that funding comes back, we can't put that infrastructure back. It's going to take years. And when you talk about the mental health population, some of whom would do extremely well if they're given that support and those programs in the community and can come back to being a productive member of society, that's gone because they become far more symptomatic. Their symptoms increase to a point where they're not getting medication. You know, if you have a physical illness, I just have a girlfriend that is going through a newly diagnosed cancer prognosis, and you know, the care and the treatment that she's getting is phenomenal. Yes, she has decent insurance, but she's getting good care. She's being able to make those appointments. You imagine if something goes wrong with your brain and you can't get an appointment for 3 to 6 months because you're on the lower end of that economic scale and there just aren't the psychiatrists. The psychiatrists that would take Medicaid no longer want to do it because they're not getting paid. And even with you know, the Affordable Health Care Act and now this new potential act in place, it's always the people, unfortunately, with mental illness that are being sidelined. And the invisible cost of that is going to be phenomenal for decades to come. The homelessness, the incarceration, the aging parents, the aging baby boomers that are trying to look after emerging adults with severe disabilities that are no longer going to be around. It's a real problem, and it's a problem that all of us are going to have to deal with. So again, I also thank you for coming out on this bad evening. But these are, you know, with each one of these issues, they are infrastructures that are crumbling and are not going to be put back just if by the signing of a bill says, okay, we'll release some of these funds. You know, many of those people that worked in the human health services, and particularly in the nonprofit world, have disappeared because not through choice, they've been laid off. They no longer have those positions. You can't build that restructure back up again. So the impact is great, and it might seem as if it's invisible because it hasn't directly impacted you. But I would hazard a guess there isn't many. There are a few people in this room that know exactly what I'm talking about, and it has had a huge impact. And you know, not to be the black sort of widow, it's going to get worse, and before it gets better, because we can't rebuild this as quickly as we need to.
I had a conversation with a child care provider probably about 6 months ago, and they were dealing with the fact that they were going to they were losing subsidized child care in communities. And I said to this advocate, well, if the state passes a budget, will those facilities reopen? And she said to me, very matter-of-factly, no, because the people who ran them will have to do something else, and they're gone. And last week, Randy mentioned these forums are happening around the state. One of these forums was held last week in Champaign. I was listening to it today, and Governor Edgar was on the panel in Champaign. And one of the things he said that I think is very important for us all to remember, that if we were to conjure up a magic wand and get everyone to agree and come up with a budget tonight, the problem's not going to go away. That the damage has been done. And one of the things Governor Edgar said last week was it's going to take years for the damage to be undone. And so I think we all need to be prepared for that. I do want to have this, I do want to invite you to join us in this conversation. I do want to share one last story with you, if I can. In March of 2015, I was talking with a political scientist, and I don't remember which one it was that I was talking to. And they posited to me that they thought it was a very real possibility that there would not be a state budget for the 4 years of Governor Rauner's term. And I remember hearing that. My eardrums were still fluttering. It was still in my ear canal as I heard it. And I remember thinking, that is just absurd. Now we're 18 months later. More than 18 months later. And it's starting to seem a little less absurd. And I think it's time that these conversations happen so that your coworkers and your neighbors don't say, I don't really think this is affecting me. I don't see how this is having any impact. So what I'd like for us to do now is you tell us some of your effects, and we'll have microphones around, and we'll just continue the conversation. I do please remind you that we want to have a conversation that is in the spirit of Paul Simon. And we want to be mindful of differences of opinions. And we have a question in the back.
I admire the fact that you're the front line in putting your fingers in the holes in the dam. But I just can't imagine that there's no conscience within our legislature, including the governor, in not realizing the effects that they're creating. Because if we took all the dead people that vote in Chicago and put them in the legislature and replace them in the legislature for those that are there now, at least there wouldn't be any opposition. At least they wouldn't be voicing opposition. How do we make that change? How do we make those people feel that guilt? How do we make our voices heard? I don't understand why they're not here, and the people like yourselves who are making it try to work are here. We need those people.
I will allow the rest of, I'll just say this. I've covered the General Assembly in Illinois for about 28 years now. And I really believe this. I don't think they're without conscience. I don't think they're bad people. I do think on a personal level, I probably have some disagreements with them. That's okay. I don't think they're without conscience. I think they have some strong held beliefs. And I think what is probably lost from the time that you were in Springfield, Kirk, is that sense of compromise being okay.
It is a different era. I mean, I came from an era, Brian mentioned the late Paul Simon. I'm a conservative Republican, but he and I were friends, and I'm in his book, P.S., and we got along great. We didn't always agree on everything. I will say this. Having been there, as Bob Gallo from the AARP said before we started this forum, make your voices heard. Definitely talk to your local legislators. You'd be surprised. Legislators, when they hear from 3 or 4 of you, they think that's a landslide that's out there. And you can make a difference with these folks. But really, this has come down to 2 people. It's come down to Governor Rauner and Speaker Madigan. And, the legislators that are there on each side obviously are very cautious not to buck either of those individuals. One of the reasons I got out of the business is I just thought the money was out of control and controlling certain members that weren't maybe as independent as I was, or Dan Cronin, who's our county board chairman, was my seatmate down there, and there were some of us who were pretty independent. But talk to your local legislators. And I do believe, like Brian said, doesn't matter what party, doesn't matter whether they're from Chicago, the suburbs, or downstate. 99% of my former colleagues are probably tossing and turning at night, very, very troubled by what's going on. And I know more than ever, there's a group of them that are trying to force the issue. They signed letters to say, hey, let's get moving here. But talk to them and give them your own personal stories. But I think most of them probably are tossing and turning and very troubled by what's going on. I will say one of the problems with waiting 2 years to do a budget is the hole keeps getting bigger and bigger because they're spending at levels that are unsustainable. That puts pressure. You may sit here as a retiree tonight and say, wow, this is great. I live in a state that doesn't tax retirement benefits. But as that hole gets bigger and bigger, they got to come looking for more and more people to fill that hole. Or if you're a retiree, if you're a College of DuPage retiree or a state employee, you may think you're fat and happy today because you are getting your retirement payments. Go talk to anybody that used to work for American Airlines. So everybody, whether you know it or not, is all in this together, and eventually it's going to explode. And you want to take care of this problem before you have a real, true explosion.
At the panel at the University of Illinois President Ellyn mentioned that there are 2 rules of the hole. The first rule of the hole is to recognize that you're in a hole. The second rule of the hole is to stop digging. And I'm not sure if those rules have been recognized yet, but I think that that's definitely...
Yeah. I'd love to add on that I also feel that our state representatives, they do care. We had the privilege of being down in Springfield last week. We make a trip down there every year to meet with our legislators and to ask for their support for different bills that we have that will help our neighbors who are hungry. And this year, we were down there advocating on behalf of a bill, 3211, a House bill. And this is really apropos to us being here at College of DuPage, because this is a bill that would allow students that are enrolled in community colleges that are part of the Perkins program to receive SNAP benefits while they are in community college. Part of the typical regs around SNAP, which are food stamps, is that you can't receive those if you're in college. And so this is something that we have asked our state legislators to approve. These students are typically getting educated in things like security or dental hygienists or in-home health care. And so these are kids that are really trying to go and better themselves and hopefully get themselves off of SNAP for most of their adult life. Mm-hmm. We went around and we talked, for our 13 counties, we talked to 14 of our different representatives, and we're able to share information about this bill. Again, it's a federally funded bill. It would be administered by the state, so the cost would be very little to the state. And we had very positive conversations. We're very hopeful that this will pass. Why will it pass? Because they actually care. And I'm talking about folks that I know, legislators I know, who really don't like food stamps. I mean, they really don't. They make that pretty clear to me. And yet for this bill, explaining to them that we could take these few years, this season of these young people's lives, and provide them with some extra support while they're getting their education so they can be self-sufficient in the future, they were all about it. So I do think our legislators care. I think they're in a very, very tough position. And
I would just, as you leave this evening, if you go down 2 flights of stairs, there's a food pantry here at College of DuPage.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That serves our students.
There are over a dozen university or community college food pantries across the state so far. And something that's really, they're popping up over the last couple of years. It really speaks to, again, a hidden need. Yep. You know, you walk around College of DuPage during the day, you may not think that anyone on campus needs to visit a food pantry. But there's a food pantry just downstairs. Our directional universities here in Illinois have done a study on that and have seen that a very large percentage, they believe up to about 40% of all of our students in college are at some point food insecure, meaning that they don't always have the food resources that they need. And you can see that. I went to Northern Illinois University. We have the Husky Student Food Pantry out there. It just went on campus this year. It's been off campus for a few years. They have seen, since bringing it on campus, since advertising and saying, we are here for you every week, you can come get the food you need, participation has tripled tripled in September. Students coming, getting the nutrition they need so that they can learn and then hopefully graduate and not need support anymore.
Okay, I certainly think that they do care, but I have to say, I think that some of them are very inefficient, or they're not looking at efficiencies that could be dramatically changed. Yes, we have a huge budget deficit and stalemate on the budget, but in my opinion, and I can only really address the issues and the population that I serve and that my staff serve and all of the volunteers and peers serve, is that there are better ways to do it. And I don't believe anybody is really listening to us. We do talk to our legislators. We talk to them consistently. We show them better ways. We have a workforce development program. We have, as one example, we have a living room at our community center. And the living room is an alternative to going to the emergency room. So if you are experiencing a heightened level of mental health, anxiety, or depression, and in the past the only alternative was to go to the emergency rooms, which, let's face it, is not the best place if you're already suffering from an anxiety attack. In the best will in the world, and we have wonderful hospitals here in the county, but you're going to be triaged, you're going to be put down the list because you're not an emergency, and that's not going to be the right place for you. And for that, the likelihood is that you'll say, there are many hours, you'll have a psych evaluation, you won't meet requirements to be hospitalized, which is, are you a danger to yourself or others? And you'll be told you need to make an appointment with your psychiatrist, assuming you have one. And for that, that cost, to whether it's to the taxpayer or to the individual's insurance, is about $3,000. The alternative, and these are popping up in small places across the state and in other parts of the nation, but they're still very, very small, is an alternative called a living room, which is a place that's run by peers. The person can go in, they can be seen immediately, have that situation de-escalated, and be hooked up with resources with follow-up. And that can be done for a little under $300. Our legislators know about this. They think it's a great idea, but do they want to do anything to help fund it? No. So in my opinion, with the population that I serve, I don't think they're bad people, and I hope they're staying awake at night, quite frankly, and not sleeping. I really do, because I certainly spend many nights lying awake worrying about where I'm going to be able to provide these services. But I think they have to listen. We are in a different environment, and I think they have to start listening to different ways of doing things, because there are better ways, and there are better ways economically to do things. We don't need thousands and thousands of people incarcerated at huge expense in the county jails. Those people need to be treated and helped and supported in the community. So, yeah, I think they're good people. I hope they're staying awake at night worrying, and I hope that they really do listen to better ways of doing things as we move forward.
Can we get
clarity on whether the local representatives were actually invited to the forum?
I did reach out to representatives. The Senate's in session.
Right. They're in spring
Okay.
break.
And the House,
Well, I traveled.
they were working until about 5 o'clock this afternoon. So
Going right forward the party line.
They were invited,
yes,
and they have other commitments.
they have other
so
commitments.
They can't be here.
Correct.
So it's kind of fair to comment appropriately that they are conscientious, they are concerned. We don't all agree with that. I understand that. But they are conscientious, they are concerned. We reach out to them. My local representative is not one of the key participants at this point. I believe Mr. Dillard said there's 2 people that can make a difference right now. I can't influence one of those people because I don't live in his district. I can only influence one of the 2. And right now, I supported our current governor for his past election. I would be very hard-pressed to do that this time around, because I think he's done a very poor job in achieving any kind of consensus. And I understand the tough nut on the other side, but he ain't doing what he said he was going to do. He has taken a posture, and that posture has existed for 2 years with no modification. I find that very unacceptable.
And we have a question in the back.
I have a nonpartisan question.
I'm not sure that that's on. Okay. Yep.
I'm a little bit naive. Without a state budget, the state is not paying bills, a lot of bills. They collect all of their income taxes, they collect all of their corporate taxes. Where's all this money?
Well, and you know, it's an interesting situation, and I think it's one of the things. I'll take my share of lumps. I think this is one of the things that is happening that I don't know that we in the news media have done a very good job of explaining. Because yes, the state is collecting money, and some bills are getting paid. They're getting paid as the money is available. But there's a situation in Illinois right now that is being exacerbated by time. In January of 2015, income tax rates in the state automatically went down. There was a temporary income tax increase, and that income tax increase sunset on January 1st of 2015. Then we did not get a new budget on June 30th of 2015. So what the state said was, we're just going to continue operating. And we're going to continue operating based on the revenue of the previous year. The revenue of the previous year was higher. So we're just going to spend at the higher rate. They are spending. They are spending. They're not paying bills. Right now, the estimate is Illinois will end this fiscal year with about $12 billion in unpaid bills. They are paying some, but they're paying bills from months and years ago. So what's happening is the rate of spend is outpacing the rate of revenue. And that's something that I don't know anyone has done a very good job of explaining. And it's a situation that makes this budget stalemate worse and worse and worse with every day.
And they did appropriate money for elementary and secondary education. You also have court orders in some cases, so you have the judiciary that's forcing spending. But like Brian said, they're spending up here, and they know the revenues because the income tax got rolled back to 3.75%. They're spending, you know, the gap is huge, and it gets larger and larger and larger every day. I will tell you, in one other stat that I picked up today is I know that the Glen Ellyn schools are owed over $2 million by the state of Illinois. And so local school districts, even though there's an appropriation for them, are falling behind and probably asking their comptroller or business officer every day, you know, have we seen the wire transfer from the state yet?
Yeah. My understanding too is that most of that budget, a vast majority of the budget, is not dollars that are actually allocated through the budget process. Most of them are
untouchable.
They're untouchable dollars.
Mandated.
I believe it's as much as like 75% of the budget is mandated, and they can't touch it. So when they aren't paying bills, they can only pay it on the small portion of our state budget.
Oh.
Hello?
Okay, this one's definitely working. Hi, my name's Samantha Wilson. I am a student here at College of DuPage, and I am part of the millennial generation, though on the far spectrum of it. I was born in '88. I'm a non-traditional student here. I have a 3.9 GPA. My one B I ever got was in Japanese because my grandmother passed away and I couldn't keep up with the language. So,
We'll take that.
but I, being a non-traditional student and going to this college and being around 18 to 23-year-olds as I spend a majority of my day, as a student with a 3.9 GPA going to one of the most prestigious community colleges in Illinois, I am quaking in my boots that I am not going to get admitted to a college in this state. I am quaking in my boots that I am not going, well, not admitted, but I won't be able to afford the tuition to any place I get admitted unless they give me a full ride or a majority scholarship or something like that. I know a majority of the students that I interact with on a daily basis are thinking about going to Colorado or, Tennessee just approved, public tuition for, I believe it's 4 years, it might be 2 years, I can't remember, but. And you had mentioned about the Amtrak thing. My plan is to go down to UIC. If I don't have a working train available to me, I'm not driving down there. That's insane, I rely on that. And I feel like I'm part of one of the last generations that actually has some opportunity in this state. Everyone else that I interact with is thinking about going out of state. They feel like they have no prospects in this state. They feel like we're just being left behind. Everyone talks about the millennial generation, but what about the kids after us? You spoke about the resource gap. My mother works as a librarian clerk in an elementary school. There are so many kids. As she's been there, the amount of kids on a free lunch program has increased dramatically. And I grew up in a working class neighborhood, and in Illinois, we're so focused on increasing property taxes, people can't handle that in my neighborhood where I grew up. That just means a bigger resource gap. How is it that we can get our legislators to invest in things that are going to actually grow our state GDP, grow our economy? From the GI Bill, we found studies that for every dollar you invest into education, you get $4 to $7 back in the long run. Increasing capital. Why aren't we investing in bullet trains? Why aren't we investing in stuff like this? This is going to increase our capital. Investing in capital is going to grow our economy. What do we do as my generation and millennial? I want to get involved in public service. I want to become a state legislator. I want to get this state back, but on a track, this should be a wonderful state. We have so much to offer. We have arid land, we have thriving metropolises, everything, and it just, I couldn't picture living anywhere else in this country, but if there's no opportunities available to me, where else do I go? So how do we, as my generation, the millennials and younger, how do we get them to start looking at things in a different way? There's things to be done in a different way. I'm so involved in politics. I call everybody every day. I'm on the phone with Raja Krishnamurthy's office every Tuesday. That's my call. I've called my local legislators, and I'm always talking to somebody's secretary. I don't know if my opinions and things are going through. We always try and show up to events like this where we're clearly the youngest people in the room. What do we do? What do we do to give my generation and the kids after me, what do we do to give them a life experience in Illinois where we don't have to leave?
I would say first off, and then I'll turn to the panel. And I always get this quote wrong because I always feel like a leave and never off. But remember what Winston Churchill said: never, 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 never give up. I realize that may seem rather empty, but I think that's what you can do. You can never give up.
Your presentation was outstanding. So do what you're doing. I will just tell you, we'll get you to UIC, and we're working on a lot of stuff, including the new Pink Line station. And there's a lot of we will get you there. The MAP program, which is the backbone of assistance for students in Illinois. When you, gentleman in the back, when he said, what do you do to get these people to move? The students descended upon the state capitol, and the legislature moved and they funded the MAP program. So they do hear, as the panelist up here said, they do hear your voice. There's more people working in downtown Chicago with more corporate relocations than anywhere else in America. One of the things we forget about when I mention corporate relocations is Mayor Emanuel always likes to remind people that 1/3 of all the teaching hospitals in the United States of America happen to be in Illinois. We have 6 of them. 6 of them. 1/3 of all the teaching hospitals in America are here. I mean, we hear about the Mayo Clinic, which is wonderful, other places, but 1/3 of the teaching hospitals are here. There's no better place for a young person to be than Chicago. The University of Illinois at Chicago, like my alma mater, WIU, or to some extent COD, is undergoing some strains, but I will tell you the leadership on that campus, and I was just there talking to urban policy students, it's awesome. There are some tremendous things going on at UIC, so I encourage you to go there. Most people don't know that UIC is a top 25 federal research institution. It has as much federal research going on as Michigan State University. It's a great place, so go there, stay there, keep doing what you're doing. I saw Congressman Krista Raja, as we call it. I sat in his office in Washington last week, and he gets it. We were talking about things, so don't give up. As Mr. O'Keefe said, never, never, ever give up. Illinois is a resilient state. We'll get through this. And when you're done, there'll be employment for you, especially somebody with your kinds of skills and an articulate ability to talk about it.
Oh gosh, you are incredible. I mean, I was so impressed with that, and you again, you've hit the nail on the head. We've got to start looking at a different way of doing things because the old way isn't working, and it's going to take people like you and the next generation to come that is really going to change things. And that was what I meant when I said that this infrastructure has gone. But then out of I've always believed, and you can't work in the mental health arena unless you absolutely believe that there's hope. There's always hope in the future. And I think that the fact that this infrastructure is gone, and as it was said, when somebody was asked, well, if they signed it and money came, how would that make things better? No. But this is our golden opportunity to start afresh and start thinking afresh, because we know that what's gone on, and again, with my population, this has been not working for 40, 50 years. This isn't something new. So therefore, I mean, I just feel chills when I hear somebody like you speak so articulately and care about the next generation to come. And it's going to be people like you that are going to think in fresh new ways and are going to change this whole structure. So keep on going, just keep going, we'll talk to me after. We'll do whatever we can.
I would piggyback on what Angela is saying about we do need to think in new and different ways. I have just started a new book about reinvention, and I apologize, I don't know who actually wrote the book. It was given as a gift to me. And within the first few pages, they are talking about companies and how companies have to reinvent themselves. And if we go back to the 1950s and the 1960s, 90% of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 list are now gone. They've been acquired or they've gone out of business. The only one that's still on there is DuPont. DuPont is the only company that has survived on the Fortune 500 list since the mid-1950s. Companies have to reinvent themselves. Over 60% of all the CEOs in the United States overseeing companies right now feel that their companies have to go through a major change within the next 3 to 5 years or they will be out of business. We need to have those kind of minds thinking about reinvention. How do we change our government? How do we change the perspective of our legislators so that we can reinvent what we're doing here in Illinois and get to a place that is sustainable and worthy of our great state? So absolutely, bringing new ideas and fresh perspective has to happen.
Can I give you one more,
Sure,
especially for your generation? On my way here today, I was on the phone with the executive director of PACE, which is our suburban bus operation, talking about how PACE can do some things that Uber does, but as he said, well, Mr. Dillard, Chairman Dillard, we'll do it better than Uber will, with more responsibility to people that have disabilities and other things. Uber just did a public-private partnership with Metra, so that if you take Metra to Naperville and you have a business appointment, You can ride on the train, have your Uber waiting at the Naperville station to take you to one of the I-88 corridor businesses, and you didn't have to drive all the way out and have a rental car or a zip car or whatever from downtown. So in my space, in the RTA space, you know, we are always looking to partner. We do have a formal partnership with Uber, but we're looking to take their technology. It's amazing what we have in my iPhone. I don't have tickets anymore to get my trains. You know, it's all done, you know, through my iPhone. I show the conductor that. I buy my tickets that way, including on the CTA. So, you know, doing more with less and being on the cutting edge of technology is something that all of us, whether you're in the mental health arena, whether you're in the food pantry business, or whether you're in the mass transit business or in higher ed. In this institution here, I've always thought the College of DuPage and I've known 4 of the presidents here, have always been sort of on the cutting edge. And when you said one of the great community colleges, I will tell you from experience that the College of DuPage would be among the top 5 community colleges in the United States. We have great community colleges. Harper's wonderful, Triton, there's some great ones, but this is one of the top 5 community colleges in the United States.
County out here so I could go to
You don't know how lucky you are.
We have a question over here.
Yeah.
I have a statement and then
Sure.
a question. Okay.
If I could get you to use the microphone.
In terms of knowing whether our state legislators are working or not, I have no clue who my House representative is, but I definitely know who my state representative is. And he started upsetting me at Christmas when he sent out a card informing me of the 30 food pantries in DuPage County alone. 30. Okay, then I talked to somebody from your organization and found out, oh, not a problem, you cover 80 food pantries. Okay, beyond DuPage, but still, 30, I thought there were 2. DuPage County, as far as I know, is one of the most affluent counties in the country, and yet we have people that fall into that category.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
He has also sent out another postcard that said he was having a town hall meeting, and the subject he was covering was the grand bargain. So anybody could come, and whether or not, you know, you have or not. My new federal House representative is Raja Krishnamurthy, and he had a town hall meeting, and one of the things that he said was somewhat that what you were talking about, that he thought that everybody in Washington would probably be so jaded that calls, emails, or letters would go, but he said, it doesn't work that way. when they keep coming in and keep coming in and keep coming in, and they're attached people, that it makes a difference even on his staff. So, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I have all of those phone numbers and emails right in front of me on my office. And no, I don't call them every day. That would be kind of a waste of energy. But they do know, you know. And in terms of, you were talking about transportation. Okay, I was disabled 10 years ago, and I live in Roselle. And I called Metro, and I said, how do I get to Woodfield? Okay, well, you go to the Roselle train station, you take it east to Franklin Park. You get on bus A, Pace Bus A to go north, and then Pace Bus B to go west. It's 4 miles away from where I live. That's, yes, okay. So you need a lot of things. Now, the other thing, down in Union Station, this is the last one, and then I'll let you breathe too. Okay, the last thing, down in Union Station for a while, there was a big easel, a big blip, where the money that Illinois had claimed for rapid transit, or really high-speed rail, that Wisconsin didn't want, and Governor Quinn went, okay. So those things were up there. Here's the map, here's the this, here's the that, they're gone. What happened to that money?
Well, let's answer your first question first. Metra's probably not the way to get to the mall, but if you call PACE, which is in charge of the Americans with Disabilities Act as well as paratransit, so if you do have someone that is in need of specialized services, including you'll see our small vans will actually come and get you. So PACE is where you need to call.
Yeah,
if you
but they only take you within the township. They'll take you to Alexian Brothers Hospital. They'll take you to the donut shop across the street from the Jewel, because the Jewel's in a different county.
That's a good donut
Okay,
shop.
but you can only,
I know that donut
if
shop.
you're not working, if you're not working and disabled, you can only register for that bus on one afternoon a week. And if they're busy,
Yeah. I still would.
maybe it's improved in 10 years.
I'm sure it has improved, and we're always
probably
working
going
to
up.
continue to improve it. You know, high-speed rail money, it's there. I watch them work on it when I drive to Springfield. I see them doing it all the time. I wouldn't call it high-speed rail. A better acronym is probably faster rail. But, you know, if you're shaving an hour between Chicago and St. Louis, that to me is progress. And what gets lost on people is people like Brian will say, where are the public-private partnerships? And I always tell them the greatest public-private partnership I know is Metra. Metra runs on the most complex rail system anywhere in the United States. Every day they take, you know, hundreds of thousands of people to work on lines that are owned and operated by private railroads. Metra doesn't own the railroads. And for high-speed rail, that corridor between Chicago, Springfield, Bloomington, Normal, St. Louis, freight runs on that. And 1/4 of all freight runs through Illinois and the United States. And that is, again, a great public-private partnership where Amazon, which is now the big beast that controls everything in this country, killing our local retailers, but Amazon or UPS, if they're moving things by freight, it improves that. So some of that high-speed rail money, while it moves people faster, also helps the private railroads as well. RTA trip planner. So you call the RTA next time if you have those issues, and if they don't give you the answer you want, you say, I want to talk to Chairman Dillard. Okay?
May I ask for clarification?
Sure.
Can I ask for clarification too? So were you surprised at the number? What's your name? I'm sorry.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
My name's Marilyn.
Marilyn. Were you surprised at the number of food pantries in DuPage County?
Oh my God,
Yes.
I thought there were about 2, and both of them were in Elmhurst, and I was shocked over that.
Oh, we have some wonderful food pantries in Elmhurst.
One of the statistics that I think a lot of people don't realize, and it's part of this discussion of hidden impacts. The fastest growing group of poverty, the fastest growth in poverty is not in urban centers. The fastest growing poverty is in suburban areas.
Yes.
So yes, we have 30 food pantries.
Yeah.
And
15 years ago, the Brookings Institute came out with, where poverty was doubling or tripling within the suburbs and was actually stable or decreasing in the urban areas as our families were looking for safer environments, better schools, better housing coming out into the suburbs. We serve 13 counties, so we make a great big C around the city of Chicago. Our sister food bank, Greater Chicago Food Depository, covers Cook County. So we're in Lake County, we go all the way down into Will County, we go south to Kankakee, and then we're gonna curve to the northwest, and we're gonna go past Grundy, DeKalb, Ogle, all the way out to Stevenson. We go about 90% across the state. There is no higher need in terms of quantity of missed meals and quantity of people that are hungry than right here in DuPage County.
And one of the things that I would also encourage you,
Marilyn's pointing at me.
because I think a lot of times we have this image.
Yeah.
We have this image in our head of what a food pantry is. And I would encourage you go to one. Go visit one. Because what you'll find is it looks a lot like the Jewel.
Yeah, please give us, if you are interested in coming out and seeing our network, we have an unbelievable network. I spent this afternoon, I was down in Joliet at St. John Lutheran Church. They're serving 30,000 people every year. 30,000 people every year. providing really wonderful food for them. And these are amazing, amazing organizations. But the reality of hunger is right here. It is right here in our communities. And what we know about the families that we are serving, particularly in the suburbs, is, as I mentioned before, these are the working poor. So 77% of our families are working, but only 15% of those families are working full-time year-round jobs. So they are trying to piece together their resources to live in these areas that are relatively high cost of living, but provide them with these great benefits. So hunger is very real. Over 800 feeding sites across our 13 counties. We invite you to get involved. Don't just come and visit. Don't just come and visit. Come and get involved. There are so many wonderful things that you can do. Hunger is a very solvable issue. Do we have enough food in America to feed everyone? We absolutely do. We are wasting billions and billions of pounds of food a year. Our whole business is let's take that food that the store is no longer going to sell, that the manufacturer isn't going to distribute, and let's turn that waste problem into a solution for our hungry neighbors. It just takes coming out and volunteering with our organizations, coming out and volunteering at the food bank, choosing to invest in the business. Over 60% of our income is given to us to make our work happen, or just raising awareness of hunger, knowing that hunger is right here, that our kids are suffering and need our help. Yep.
We have a question over here.
Yeah, my name's Frank Brow. One thing I wanted to correct first. Our debt is $13.7 billion as of the other day when I was on the comptroller's website. I'm a controller for a nonprofit in Chicago. Our monies, while they're not in the vein of Mr. Dillard's, we are owed $350,000 from the state to support our operation in the Sheridan Correctional Facility. We do job training for people there, and we have an 80% track record of getting guys jobs that are coming out and not going back to the hood, not going into drugs or anything else. And that's what we're all about, but the state has, basically put a stranglehold on us because as a nonprofit, banks laugh at you when you go to borrow monies or whatever. So we've had to use other alternative sources where the interest rates are phenomenal, to say the least. And we paid over $700,000 last year in interest rates just to fund our operation going forward. And it's just a bad cycle.
Let me ask you this question. I'm sorry, your name was?
Frank.
Frank, what would you do if you had that $350,000?
Pay off the people that we're borrowing the money from, number one, so that we didn't have to pay interest rates. But, one other quick correction is the 13.7 is the known debt that the comptroller shows. There's a huge amount of unknown debt that is the 1% carry cost that the state has to pay to, companies like mine, not to Mr. Dillard's, but to companies like mine that is mandated through the laws of the state that say 1% over 90 days has to be paid. And the state's not accruing that like a normal business would to pay that back either. So it's horrendous right now, what's going on, and kind of a joke as far as the public being told the truth of how bad we are right now.
I would share with you, my dad used to say this to me when I would say, well, it's only $100. And he would say to me, if there was $100 on the sidewalk, you'd bend over and pick it up, wouldn't you? And then I'd say, yeah, I'd bend over and pick it up. And the reason I say that is you may only be owed $350,000. But if there's $350,000 sitting on the sidewalk, you'd bend over and pick it up.
Absolutely.
But also that $350,000 that if you got it tomorrow would pay back just the loans. But again, that hidden cost of all of those young people, the clients that you're working with, who are not now able to perhaps go through this program to get those jobs, what's going to happen to them? They go back on the streets. They're going to be possibly incarcerated. That's going to cost the state triple, quadruple what you're owed.
Right.
And again, it comes back to it's a false economy. This is not getting us anywhere, and we have to rethink, because that's a prime example. And what you're experiencing is being experienced up and down the state, right the way through, every single day, with literally hundreds and hundreds of organizations.
And I don't want to, the 13.7 billion is just the operating deficit. We haven't even talked about the big one. Don't go running for the doors, but that's the $100+ billion of pension liability, which is now in just our in terms of our operating budget is $6 or $7 billion of the state's regular annual budget goes to pay these retirement payments. Wow, could that really be used for their programs or elementary and secondary education, or this young lady's higher education? So, you know, the pension, you know, you can have one of these forms on that all by itself.
What I kind of insinuating is that our news media in total needs to start really getting the truth of what is going on with our state, how bad off we are, and wake up some of the people in this state that, you know, say, oh, it's not affecting me. It affects everybody in this state.
I feel like I need to come to the defense of my colleagues and myself. and only say this, we're trying. This, I will tell you, I have covered in my career countless very complicated stories. Mm-hmm. This one is crazy complicated. Mm-hmm. And the amount of time that we have to tell you is the same or smaller. And so we're trying, but it's crazy complicated. You know, this thing with the taxes, the revenue, that's something, I want to be able to explain that story, and sometimes I sit in my office and think to myself, how can I tell that succinctly? And I struggle with it because it's just complicated, and there may not be a succinct story, but we do need to try better. And a question over here?
Yeah, hi. My name's Keith, and first I'd like to say thanks for everyone coming out and being here. Illinois truly is a great state. Beautiful, we all like it here. You know, it's going to take real bipartisan effort from not only all of us individuals, but from our quote-unquote elected officials and the big two that sit up top. Just some interesting facts. Illinois is the 5th wealthiest state in the United States of America. Illinois is the third lowest, receives the third lowest amount of federal grants per federal tax dollar that we pay. Illinois ranks number 4 in the lowest amount received in federal financial assistance per federal dollar that we pay. Meaning, we get a bad rate of return on our federal tax dollars. If you look, we're known as a blue state, right? You look at some of the red states. Let's look at Tennessee. Tennessee just passed free public higher order tuition for the millennials, for the kids, for seniors, for whoever would like to go to school. Because as they said up front, education pays. Education returns 4 to 7 times every dollar that's spent on it. Education grows your communities. Per the pension problem, yes, it's a problem, and it's a bipartisan problem that both the Dems and Republicans and Dems have had their fair share in hand in partaking. We can look here at the DuPage County Board, the Republican one right now. You can look in the Daily Herald and find the pension loophole. They give them out like hotcakes. You can work part-time, get 3 pensions. I'm sure both sides have their fair share. Illinois has the highest amount of units of government out of any state in the United States. Town, it's 7,000 units. It's a lot. I'm originally from Colorado. We only have county government out there. It's very confusing. I'm sure the town, I'm sure they each do wonderful things. However, it's very confusing when you live in one area, you got to go to another area, only to realize you're not the right area. Again, there is now a resolution that counties can dissolve their townships so long as there is a local municipality that holds center and holds responsibility. The residents, the citizens.
Right.
Right. So that's congratulations to actually both sides working together to achieve fair balance. The state debt, a big problem. Again, a bipartisan problem. You can look at the state, you can look at the CPS. Both the governor and the mayor were advised by their financial advisors to join class action lawsuits.
Keith, do you have a question that you're getting to?
My questions is, we're talking about all the stuff and complexities here. The chilling effects of property tax freeze that lowers your market value of your house. The milk and egg tax that's been countered as a response to Rauner's austerity diet. Taxing people's milk, eggs, and medicine surely is going to just increase the gap. We do look to find other answers. There are other answers. There are other ways. We can look to the states of North Dakota that has a state bank. We can look at the Fair Economy Coalition of Illinois that does present a budget that balances, it's net even.
I think one of the things that you're going to see, to touch on some of these things you're bringing up, one of the things that we're going to see, and whether we like it or not, is we're going to have to explore some revenues. We're going to have to look at some places that we haven't looked before. And in the past, the place to look before has been sin tax. We'll just add some tax on tobacco. We'll add some tax on alcohol. I'm not sure that well hasn't been played out. The other well that, Kirk, you could probably speak to this as well as I can. It seems like it's not the end of a legislative session until someone starts talking about gambling. And now there is a proposal to expand casinos in Illinois. I don't know that that's going to bring a whole lot of new money, or if it's just going to cut the pot up smaller and smaller. But the reality is Illinois is going to have to look to some revenue sources, whether it's retiree income,
yep,
or taxing services. This is not a problem. Kirk, you were telling me before we got started about the Civic Federation proposal, and that proposal very clearly states that this is not a problem we're going to be able to cut our way out of or tax our way out.
Yeah, the Civic Federation of the Commercial Club, the City Club of the Commercial Club, all of the major business leaders of Chicago did embrace an increase in taxes. They're the employers this week. They said you have to cut a couple of billion as well. But when you're looking at getting the kinds of revenue that the state needs, there's really only two places you can get it. The income tax, which is clearly the fairest tax, I believe. Property tax, probably the most unfair but the income tax being the most fair, and then sales taxes. And Illinois has a very narrow sales tax base, so I think you expand your sales tax base. The Civic Federation said to do an income tax increase. I'd sunset it sometime in the future. I know Governor Rauner wants to layer property taxes over probably for the same number of years, property tax freeze for the same number of years that the income tax would be extended. But when you're looking, you know, at, and no pun intended, at nickel and dime kinds of ways to raise revenue, it's the income tax and the sales tax that are going to be the ones that are going to give you 90% of the pie. And you've got to look at those two. But you got to broaden out your sales tax in this state. Most of the states around this tax far more services than Illinois does. And Illinois, while I would keep our income tax under 5%, is generally among states that do have an income tax. It's flat, as this gentleman pointed out, but it is less than some of our neighboring states like Wisconsin. So income tax and sales tax to find the kinds of money, but you got to make cuts and you got to make structural changes in your budget. And then one other thing we haven't talked about tonight, I've always believed, having once been a chief of staff to a governor, we need to do what Texas has done, and that's have a wholesale assault on Medicaid fraud and abuse. Not for people who need it or deserve it, but those who abuse it. And in Texas, they saved well over $1 billion, and I think you can find at least several hundred million in Medicaid fraud and abuse in a state like Illinois. In fact, Newt Gingrich, who's back in the limelight under President Trump, used to laugh and say, you know, he believed $1 in $10 in Medicaid was fraud, and then he would snicker and say, and you can imagine what it would be like a place like Chicago. Medicaid fraud and abuse ought to be on the table as well.
So one last thing, thank you. One last thing, going back to SNAP and SNAP recipients. The single largest group of recipients of SNAP isn't lazy people. It's single, hardworking moms. Single moms, SNAP recipients, hardworking. You know, we all deserve, we all like Henry Ford, right? A great capitalist, right? You know what he did back then? He raised the wage. You know why? So people could actually buy his cars. It's a funny phenomenon that when we pay people a living wage, we don't have to pay them welfare.
Thank you for your kind words on SNAP. I appreciate that.
We all rise.
Yeah. I appreciate so many of our children are benefits of food stamps and SNAP, and it's important for them. It is we believe very much in the private response to hunger, as I've mentioned, but we also ask our legislators to drive the public response as much as they're able, and SNAP is a great defense against hunger. And it's an efficient program, it's an effective program, and we believe wholeheartedly that working together with our food pantries is how we can really provide our families with their nutrition and the relief that they need so that they can go to bed with full bellies. We're all about full bellies, and so many of our families really rely on those benefits, and we are hoping that they will continue at their current levels in the coming years.
I would just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I would like to thank the panel. Angela, did you want to?
No.
Oh, okay. Angela Adkins with NAMI DuPage, Kirk Dillard, the chairman of the RTA board, and Julie Yurko from Northern Illinois Food Bank. And thank them for joining us this evening. And finally, I would encourage you to continue having this discussion. Have this discussion with your neighbors. Have this discussion with your coworkers. Have this discussion with your lawmakers. Because if the discussion stops tonight, that discussion that I had this morning at the radio station with a coworker who said, I don't really think it's affecting me, it will keep happening. So continue having this discussion. Thanks for coming out.
We'll get to him someday. So Patty Belloc was my office mate. So she was